Hello again, college football fans. It is Friday, October 27th, 2023, and Bama's off-week bonanza of Bama Randy videos continues. And today I'm going to talk about point spreads and possible upset, not upset picks, but upset potential this week. I feel like I've gotten a few more views recently because I'm using more keywords in the titles for people to look up. I'm not going to have any team names or coach or player names in this one, but I think I'm going to put something about gambling or betting. I know that gets people's interest up, but this is in no way a gambling guide or advice video. These are just looking up and down the top 25 schedule and games that seem interesting to me, and I felt like doing a video, so I'm going to talk about it. 11 a.m. games are always where I look first for upsets in the top 25. I guess I don't know why it seems to work out better for underdog teams. I guess you'd have to study psychology to figure something like that out, but it just seems to work out that way. 11 a.m. games are bad news for highly favored teams. And this week we got 3. And honestly, I don't feel good about picking an upset in any one of these, but I just know after watching football for 30-some years now that one of these teams is going to have a rougher day than they ever intended when they woke up that morning. You got FSU at Wake. Florida State is favored 20.5 in that game. I don't know enough about either one of these teams. I know a little bit about Florida State. I watched them play LSU, but that's been forever ago now. But I'm still high on them, and I still feel like their resume. And I watched them a little bit here long against Clemson and Duke last week and everything. I still really like their defense. I still think they are probably in the discussion with Ohio State as to having, and maybe Texas as well, as having the best wide receiver core in America, and they've got a great quarterback. I like a lot about Florida State. They've been my number one team every week. I've done a top 4 this year in these videos. So the fact that they got pushed a little bit last week against Duke kind of makes me tend to think that they're going to not get pushed around this week. Like I said, none of these look like real goods. Oklahoma got pushed around a little bit last week. That's sort of a theme among a lot of these teams as we go on here. Penn State, Indiana at Penn State. Penn State is favored 32 in that. That seems like an awful lot of points to me, especially for Penn State against Indiana. Indiana plays some pretty good defense. I've seen a little bit of them through the season. Back to the Oklahoma-Kansas game, though. Kansas is 5-2, and Oklahoma, they beat Texas, and now they're up on the mountaintop as far as the media's perception and a lot of people around the country. So I don't know if I'm ready to call Oklahoma the kind of team that's just going to easily take care of a 5-2 Kansas team, yet. They could prove me wrong. And like I said, they got pushed last week by Central Florida, so that doesn't bode well for Kansas. But like I said earlier, just count on either Florida State, Oklahoma, or Penn State having a longer afternoon than they intended. Sort of interesting games that I saw. Picking upsets is impossible, so that's why I'm not really picking any. But I'll just tell you the ones I feel like have a better potential to wind up that way. BYU at Texas. BYU's another 5-2 team. They beat Arkansas. Texas is having quarterback problems, but Texas is another team that is just coming off a week where they got pushed in a game that they shouldn't have been pushed in. So, I don't like picking favored teams that are having a few doubts. They had that week of practice with the coaches having plenty of ammunition to fire their way about how bad they looked and how they need to correct mistakes. So, but still, BYU, I think that's a sneaky game against Texas, who's not going to have Quinn Ewers. It would still be a huge upset, but it's interesting. USC is spiraling, it seems like, and they're at Cal. I watched Cal play Auburn. Their defense looked great in that game. course, it could have a lot to do with the fact that Auburn is struggling very much with their offense this season so far. But Cal just seems like a tough team to me. It's in their place. And like I said, USC is spiraling a little bit. There have been reports about Lincoln Riley missing practice this week, which, I think the word is that he's sick. It just seems like that's a bad time after having lost 2 straight games. That's a bad timing issue right there for Lincoln Riley. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. Washington at Stanford. Washington got pushed again by Arizona State last week. Stanford has a horrible record, so I wouldn't expect Stanford to make too many waves in this game, but certainly worth watching. Ohio State at Wisconsin doesn't bode well for Wisconsin, I don't think. They're a 5-2 team. This is at night. It's at their place. So I think Ohio State will have enough motivation. And Wisconsin is the closest thing to a big brand name right now in the Big Ten outside of Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. So Ohio State should have enough ammunition, even though this is a perfect sort of letdown game scenario for them to come in there and handle their business. Vanderbilt at Ole Miss. This is the most interesting game as far as point spreads go to me in the SEC this week. This game has a tendency to get wild. Not every year, but a lot. Probably more than it should when you think about Vandy. But, Vandy has lost a lot of games this year, but they haven't lost many of them by very wide margins. Ole Miss is favored by 24.5 in this. That seems like an awful lot of points to me as well. And Ole Miss definitely has the potential to lay a defensive egg. I mean, they already have a couple of times this year, especially against LSU, but they won it, obviously. I think they allowed some yards and some points against Tulane and Georgia Tech, and I think Vandy can certainly hang around the neighborhood with those teams. So 24.5 seems like too many points for Ole Miss to win in this one to me. And I think that it's going to be probably high scoring. Ole Miss is going to win, I would almost guarantee, but I expect this to be maybe a little bit of a wild game. And like I said, Vandy's, they had a great showing against Georgia, so why couldn't they against Ole Miss? Now, it is in Ole Miss's place, but Vandy, I don't think road games shouldn't matter that much to Vandy because a lot of times their home games are road games. If you're an SEC fan, you'll know what I'm talking about. Oregon State at Arizona. Not that interesting of a game to me, but Arizona's coach has a very interesting story that I would like to bring some light to for any of the viewers of the Bama Randy channel. I would imagine most of you, since all I talk about mostly is Alabama and the SEC, just a little bit about the country. But Arizona's coach is a man named Jedd Fisch. And when they were playing USC late at night a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks back, this was around midnight. I was watching it because USC was still undefeated at that time. And, I like to watch these games with big, highly ranked, undefeated teams, at least the beginning, to see if it's going to be worth watching. And that game certainly was worth watching. I think it wound up going to... No, it didn't go to overtime. But USC wound up winning by 2 points. I fell asleep before the end of it, but I gave it a good shot. A buddy of mine texted me to draw my attention to it, and of course I told him I was already watching it, and he asked me what the Arizona's coach's story was. He said, I know he went to Florida, I think he played for Spurrier. And I thought to myself, well, if he played for Spurrier, he never got on the field, because I remember most of those Spurrier quarterbacks when he was at Florida, and he played a lot of quarterbacks. Spurrier would get upset if the offense wasn't going the way he wanted it to, and he'd yank the quarterback in a heartbeat and throw somebody else out there. And I never heard Jedd Fisch's name come up, so I looked him up. And from what I understand from the article, now this was late at night, so I may not get all of this right, but he never played college or high school football. He wanted to be a part of the Florida football program, and somehow or another got into Steve Spurrier's sphere of influence, I guess, and badgered him long enough that they created at Florida a position that never existed before that. A grad assistant position. Now, I thought that was something that had always, or a student assistant position or something like that. I thought that was something that always had existed, but maybe not. Maybe Jedd Fisch invented that at Florida. And if it wasn't that, that's the understanding that I had coming away from the article. That he badgered Steve Spurrier enough that Steve created a position for him so that he could be a part of the football team, and he's parlayed that into a career in college football and is now a head coach at a major Pac-12 university, which I think is an astounding story, and is having quietly a pretty good year out west this year. I mean, he's I remember seeing earlier in the season Mississippi State played them, and it took overtime for State to beat them, and that was back when Mississippi State realized that they sucked, I think. And early season games, strange things like that happen. And then they have gone on to only lose 2 since then, and those 2 losses they had been against USC and Washington, who is still undefeated, as you probably know, and lost to USC by 2 points, lost to Washington by 7. So they've lost 3 games this year, none of them by more than 7. And they're playing Oregon State, and Oregon State is coming to their place. So it's only a 3-point spread, which I don't consider a spread at all. That's a toss-up game in my mind. So it wouldn't really be an upset, but I just feel like that's an interesting guy to watch. I mean, I would have loved to have done something like that. I never had any ambition to play football after junior high school because, I I didn't feel like I had the size or the athleticism to do anything like that. But I would have loved to have been a coach. And I guess I always assumed that you had to have played if you want to get into coaching. But this guy didn't take no for an answer. And here he is making a few waves out west, which is good for him. Good for you, Jedd Fisch. Anyway, those are the interesting games that I was looking at through the top 25 schedule this weekend. And maybe you'll agree with some of the things I said. Maybe you'll make a little bit of money. Like I said, this is not advice. No one should take advice from me about anything. I have a YouTube channel that I do out of my car, and I think I have 19 subscribers right now. So no, don't take advice from me about anything. But have fun watching the games this weekend. It's Friday, so I imagine this will be the last video that I do during the Alabama off week, and then we'll get back into Bama play next week against LSU, and I'm going to be, obviously, I think I'll try to do the prediction video about that one early in the week, and from then on, who knows. Thanks for watching.